Thank you for being here amidst all the circumstances. I just want to say right out of the gate how thankful I am for everyone here who had made the effort to come from both maybe down the street from Melbourne and overseas. We have people who came from New York, Stella. Heather Whiteman came from the Bay Area. My son came along with me, so I dragged him out because I needed some hard labor done. So, but it is a big deal. I just want to call it out right now. The coronavirus is on everyone's mind, and it's something that, as a conference organizer, I am particularly sensitive to in bringing community together. So there are regulations coming out. There are best practices being shared all over the place. For us today, it's really important, I think, that we respect each other's boundaries. If someone does not want to shake hands or hug or something like that, just be aware of that. I heard from Laura that that's actually been put forth as don't do in terms of hugging or shaking hands. At the same time, I want to make sure that we are a community and that we are here fully present and that we get the most out of our 2 days together. There were workshops this morning. Many of you participated in those. To those who facilitated those, Dr. Adrian Medhurst, Dr. Heather Whiteman, and Tess Walton, thank you for doing that, sharing your wisdom and ideas. I also want to say, not only with regards to the coronavirus, but here in Australia, I've been particularly sensitive to the brush fires that you all have endured over the past several months. I was here in November, experienced many of them firsthand and saw it, so my heart goes out. And one of the things that we want to do is support local communities. So just know that this is, yes, an event, but we want to stay in touch and talk about how we can fundraise, how we can raise awareness and different things like that. So it is truly an honor to be here. I want to thank the PAFOW staff for putting this together. In particular, Laura Osborne, one of your fellow country people. Laura, thank you. This would not be happening without you. It's not rational to do an event 7,000 miles away from home. It's just not something that you wake up in the morning and do. So we were pulled based on the demand in this marketplace, in this region. And we're also, frankly, I have a kinship with it. Going back to my days at Inform in the early 2000s, a lot of innovation has happened out of Australia. Why that is, you all can shed light on that over the next couple days. But I just want to let you know right up front that I am a learner. And I am here to learn from you. And I am going to share some ideas here at the outset to get us kicked off. But rest assured, I hope all of us come here thinking about how we can learn, take new ideas out, and apply them. If it's not going to be applied, then we're going to marginalize our value and our time together. So who here has been to a PAFOW event before? Okay, a handful of you. So if you've been to these events, what's my most important thing that I kick off each event with? Damn it, I suck. Safety. So I already talked about safety, what's going on with the coronavirus. It speaks to physical safety, but I'm also going to talk about psychological and emotional safety. So it's a big deal to get up on stage, share your ideas, put yourself out there. And this event is really about pushing the envelope. We asked our speakers to, hey, where are you going? It's not a show and tell about what you've done necessarily, although you might share some things that you've done, but where are you heading? Because that's something that we can all connect to, because the world is changing and it's changing really, really fast. And it's creating a lot of anxiety. So if we can invest our time and say, hey, gosh, there's some new ideas emerging, and this is actually going to not only help me be more stable and solid and confident in my role, but I in turn can go out and say, hey, God, Thomas Rasmussen in NAB is doing this and he thinks it's a good idea and this is something I'm thinking. So we can align our efforts and advance the discipline. And that's why we're here in Sydney. And that's why we went to London last year for the first time. That's why we're on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States. We're building a global community around those who want to make this discipline matter. And this discipline being people analytics. So before I go further, I was inspired last year when I came here. And heard first the welcome to country. And it made me reflect on my homeland and honoring the Native Americans whose soil that I was born into and have lived my life. So I am not going to be as eloquent as I probably should be around honoring the native peoples of this land, but I will say this, is anyone actually, I'm going to ask this, is anyone schooled in proper welcome to country? Okay, then I'm going to do my best. Because I don't know the pronunciation of the native people. I should have written it down, so I apologize for that. But I will say this, is that we are echoes of the generations that have come before. So I honor those who have come before, those who are present, and those in the future who have honed this land for their lifetime, for eons. And again, I want to pay respects to them as we go, and I hope we all do as we move forward, not only today, but in time. Okay? Who are we as an organization? We're about people, data for good. And I am writing an article, and I'm going to do a few sessions on what this means. But for us now, it's really about the ethical and responsible use of people, data, and analytics. And this is going to be pervasive over the themes over the next 2 days. And it's not only about individuals and organizations, but it's about really improving society. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. A little bit about PAFOW. We just reincorporated, reorganized, restructured as a B Corp. That's a public benefit corporation. We thought about becoming a nonprofit, but we chose a B Corp. But we have reporting requirements and responsibilities beyond just making money around the environment, around our customers, around our employees and the communities in which we do business. So look out for that, because we're effectively eating our dog food around social responsibility. Thank you for the sponsors. So the reason we're able to come over here to Sydney and go elsewhere in the world is because we've now courted, and they've courted us around, hey, let's reinvent what we're doing with this event. So thank you to the sponsors who have invested in this. We are live streaming, so you can tell people, and we're going to be playing music all day. I didn't want to. That was actually cool. We just let that go. We're live streaming both on LinkedIn and YouTube. So our PAFOW company page, as well as our PAFOW channel. So you can follow and let your colleagues know about that. You'll be given an invite later today to the PAFOW community app. So all of you should have received an invite to the PAFOW event app. I apologize in advance for 2 apps, but that's the way the world works. There's just different functionalities. The PAFOW community app is where you'll be able to access the slides. It's also where you're going to be able to access audio recordings and video recordings of the presentations. So if you can't be in both rooms, you can visit that recording or presentation after the fact. And I want to give shouts out, by the way, to the Maura Jameson staff right out of the gate, as well as the Slides Live crew who are making all that possible in terms of the live streaming and recording. If you haven't seen this already, the login is Amora, the password's conference for the local Wi-Fi. Follow us on these social media channels, platforms. That's the word I was looking for. So obviously we're doing a lot on that front, and increasingly, given what's happening in the world, we're going to do a lot of more recorded media. So with that, I am going to go super fast, because I need to get out of Dr. Adrian Medhurst's way, because he's going to be immeasurably more interesting than I am. But before I launch into my little spectacle, does everyone have a copy of the show guide? Yeah? It's pretty cool. I want to give shout out to Sarah Sparnan, who is our graphic designer, who not only has done this, but the branding that you see around here. The agenda is going to be pretty aggressive, as we say it. So this is pretty much a drink from the fire hose, and we craft it this way. Because if you walk away with some ideas and ways forward, great. There are going to be some sessions that are going to slow down and go deeper, so look for those as well. But suffice to say, there's no shortage of content, and again, you'll be able to access that after. So without further ado, I'm going to go in. Why is this theme of people, data, and analytics important to me, and why is there urgency around it? Now, this, of course, is my opinion, but it is something that has resonated with most everyone I've spoken to over the last several years. I am a parent. People ask, well, what do you do? Who are you? Number one, I am a father. That is the most important role and title I will have in my life. And I've crafted the last 20 years to have that be my reality, to be present for my kids. Now, that doesn't make me a great parent, but that's where my priority is. Now, being very attentive to what's happening in the future of work, I have a lot of anxiety about how Cash, who is taking photos back there, and yes, it does piss me off that he's taller than me, just so you know, and our daughter, Abe, who's a junior in high school. So both of these young people, and you likely have young people in your lives, whether it be your own children or someone you know, are going to be entering the workforce. And what is their experience going to be? Now, I struggle with this because I know that many people are overworked, they're underappreciated, they don't have career trajectory that they can see that instills confidence in how they should be investing their time. And this has been highlighted by many researchers, among them Rob Cross, who was fantastic in our Philadelphia event last fall, and there's a recording out there which you can access after the fact. But he wrote an article around collaborative overload, and I imagine all of you can appreciate this. We're getting pinged by all these different avenues of communication, and what is that doing to our capacity? He's doing some great research on well-being and capacity and performance right now, which Dr. Medhurst is going to touch on as well. In our most recent event in San Francisco, just over a month ago, Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer spoke, and he talked about us and people analytics and HR in general being in the wellness business. And it really resonated with me. You know, frankly, both these gentlemen are among my heroes because they talk in very plain language about what the heck we should be doing. It's not all about making money. It's not all about increasing productivity. It's about doing good by people. Not only people in organizations for productivity's sake or teams, but diversity groups and also different cohorts as you go young and old and so forth. People are actually dying for a paycheck. And I, like Dr. Pfeffer, believes this has to stop. We have to do better. And we in people analytics have a unique opportunity, and I'll also put forth a responsibility to shed light on the worker experience. What's going well, what's not going well, what can we do to improve it? So herein lies our challenge over the next couple of days. So this is what we're going to fire through. Now, given where I am on time, this means that I'm going to have about 5 minutes for each of these. And I have about 50 slides to get through. I don't have 50, only 40. But what we're going to do, we are going to hustle. So one of the things we do not do is rate speakers after our conferences. You know why? Because I don't want to look bad. Because, no, actually, we don't, in all seriousness, because we don't want to have anybody up here feeling that they're being graded. I'm making a very conscious decision right now to go fast because I want to set the framework for the next day and a half. Okay? Future of work. So when I started in this field in the early 2000s, organizations were at a competitive disadvantage because they had too little data. How many people we have? I don't know. What's our turnover? I don't know. How do you calculate turnover? Good question. Is the end of period head count, average head count over the period? You know, who knows? We're just trying to get our data right. Fast forward to 2020, many organizations and people analytics teams are at a competitive disadvantage because there's too much data. We don't know what to look at. We don't know how to look at it sometimes. And there's data both inside and outside the organization. So what is the optimal quantity and quality of information? And this is where we can get it just right and really serve as a competitive advantage. This notion was highlighted in Nate Silver's Signal and Noise, which is actually probably 10 plus years old now, but it's certainly worth having on your shelf, if not giving it a read. So I'm going to apologize in advance because no doubt someone is going to present a slide like this over the next couple of days. Who's seen a slide like this where you start with dashboards and you do basic analysis? And so again, I apologize to everybody because I want to get it out of your head. I'm not a proponent of this because let me go back. How many organizations actually gotten up to the upper right there? I so wished I had a pointer right then. It didn't exist. Not many. Not many, because they keep bumping up reality. They get pulled back to dashboards and reports because that's the priority of organizations. So what I advocate is unbundling the work and Here you have advanced analytics, but bring everything forward. If you do this, what happens? If you're pushing out reports to your internal customers, we're going to talk about internal customers in a second, what do they say? What's that? Give me more, ideally, if there's a story around it, if it has meaning for them. But what do most say? If you're pushing out a report, what do they say? So what? What's the story? What's it telling me? Now, what's a great way to tell a story around data? It's not a trick question. Analytics. You analyze something, you tell a story, you see if you have the appropriate data, you put together a coherent narrative that inspires confidence in some type of change. If you do that, what does that do? It provides context and meaning for the actual data that you're pushing out, right? Now turnover has a meaning. Engagement has a meaning. But that doesn't happen on accident. It happens through analytics. So, fourth industrial revolution, I'm sure you all heard about this. Most of us are wearing some type of watch that's collecting data. We all have phones that collect data. The idea that we're bringing the physical, digital, and biological spheres together. The key takeaway here, because we're not going to get too deep into it, although Dr. Metter is going to talk a bit about this, is we have, again, this plethora. You want me to mumble that again? Plethora of data. We have an abundance of data. Now, what's the ethics around using that data? Who owns that data? Now, in my view, we're heading to a world where individuals are going to own their data, and they're going to use that data more consciously. They're going to choose who they share it with. Right now, LinkedIn is arguably the best example. And if you are aware, Microsoft purchased LinkedIn. LinkedIn sued HiQ Labs. HiQ Labs was scraping LinkedIn's data. You know how many organizations scrape LinkedIn's data? A lot. A lot. You know why there's even more? Because HiQ won that suit against LinkedIn. So now they can, again, I'm on both sides here. So because I want people to have control of their data, I want those who are investing in these platforms to be able to subsist and do what they do. But I also believe that there is a value proposition for individuals to have that data scraped and put out. Why? Because it delivers value back to that individual. Is that correct? Now, can that be compromised in some ways? Potentially. Absolutely. But that speaks to the ethics, which can be a whole conference in and of itself. But again, just let's keep this in mind, because one of the things I'm going to emphasize as I interview speakers and do panels is we have a challenge. In my view, we have a crisis in our discipline of creativity, of clarity, of courage to take that step forward that's actually going to benefit not only the organization, but individuals. So this is the future of work as I see it. In 2008, what happened? Well, we had regular employees which were a source of competitive advantage, and they were sustainable, and they required long-term investment, long-term thinking. And then there was this downturn. And who knows, we might be on the brink of yet another one. But what happened in 2008, 2009, 2010? Did the hiring come back commensurate? Even though the economy rebounded, did the hiring come back in line with what was precedent in 2007, 2008? No, it did not happen. But did the work go away? No, the work got shifted, right? The work got shifted to consultants, contractors, outsourced providers, and increasingly now, over the last 10 years, we have AI, we have machine learning, and a lot of other tools that have automated the work. Now, we're at historically low levels of unemployment in many countries around the world. Now, are those people underemployed? Are they doing what they're gifted to do? Are they optimizing their impact to the organization and to society? Who knows? It's certainly worth investigating through what we call people analytics. Okay. You with me so far? Okay, again, I told you I was going to go fast. So over the next couple days, this is what I ask you to do. Is you're all in organizations, you might be in technology companies, you might be a student, you might be established professional, but you have some current state that you're looking at. Your either individual reality or organizational reality, and where do you aspire to go? So in assess current state, future state, you identify a gap. From there, you explore options. Then you make a decision. Then you create the outcome based on that decision, and you actually put it in play and act. You follow me? So what we're going to do over the next couple of days is really current state, future state. Explore what's possible. Ask what if. And what I ask you to do is shrink the inner critic and elevate the compassionate witness. Just that lens that says, God, what would be cool if we did that? What if we did that? So let's try and shrink the inner critic over the next couple of days. So the way I'd like us to view ourselves is suppliers of information. And we usually go through a partner, HR business partner, for example, and eventually to an end customer. That end customer can be a decision maker, an executive, for example. It could be a segment of the workforce. Sometimes we go in partnership with that individual or group, and sometimes, increasingly, we're building solutions for that end customer to access. You with me? I'm breaking it down very simply for us because there is a challenge that I believe we've missed, and I really want to raise awareness around it. If we can create confidence-inspiring stories, that's going to inspire people to change at the end of this over on the right. If they're not confident, inspiring stories, they're not going to shift. Okay, so how can we do that? So a way to look at it is what I call a data to change process. So here we have systems and data, and we aggregate that data, then we analyze, report out on it, and then we generate insight through analytics. Again, one of the things that I harp on all the time is analytics is a process. When I started at Gap Inc. in the early 2000s, I was walking around the hall saying, hey, I'm director of human capital analytics. You know how many friends I made? 0. It kicked me out of the building. You're trying to sound smart, dummy. We rebranded ourselves Employee Insights to mirror what was happening on the consumer side. They had consumer insights. Then we did some work that actually connected those two bodies of work. We still, however, have to package and tell a story. Again, going back to my earlier career, I had a 60-page deck, scatter plots, R squares all over the place. I'm like, man, this is cool. They're going to really be confident. And then I went to the VP, and she said, you got 8 slides, buddy. I'm like, no, you have to know. No, 8 slides, so we have to package it. And as you well know, and one of the best lessons I ever heard, would just bring the change or recommendation up front and then have the analytics behind it, defend that if need be. We still have to communicate and facilitate discussion around it, and finally act on it, make change happen. You with me? Okay. Herein lies the gap. In doing an assessment on this, there's a gap in actually packaging it and communicating it. And there's a whole host of reasons for this. This resonate with people? Yeah? And I'm not going to blame HR business partners, and I don't want us to blame the HR business partners. They're humans. They're doing what is appropriate given their situation. But there's huge opportunity to upskill them. We're going to talk about that over the course of the 2 days. So executives, that end customer on the far right, they can give a rat's tail what technologies they're using. They just want the insight when they want it, right? And the technologists, similarly, they're just implementing systems and make sure it works. We, however, have to be aware of the whole data to change process. And what's lacking in most organizations is the governance to make this happen. Okay? Again, herein lies real opportunity for us in the profession. So going back to this model, historically, we've been content, sometimes blindly, of being customers of the data that's generated within an organization. So what's the number one reason HR or talent-related technologies are implemented? To do what? To actually improve or create a process. Learning management system, performance management system, applicant tracking system, they're there to improve or create a process that didn't exist before. Were those technologies meant to generate data to in turn generate insight downstream? More often than not, no. So we as analysts are often charged with doing magic with this data that's ill-suited to answer the questions leaders want or need to know. So we have to be mindful of that and get ahead of the problem. And when these decisions are made, that we go with our partner and us as suppliers and go to these decision makers and say, hey, what stories do you want told? What data are going to tell those stories? And what technologies are going to be able to supply that data? So in summary, we need to design what we're creating. We have to make sure we have the inputs and then the process, and ultimately we're going to be facilitating change. Sound good? Because this is all about me. I need to feel good. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, half kidding. Human needs and what to do about it. So we just talk about the workforce and what we're going to do to provide insight. But as human beings, after the basics, in my view, we want three basic things. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be empowered. We don't want to be told what to do as knowledge workers. You know, who here needs their performance managed? Who here wants their performance managed? It's a trick question. Well, I know I should answer that way, but who here wants feedback? Now, that's to open a whole can of worms. Because I don't want feedback. You know what I want? I want to be seen, I want to be heard, and I want to be empowered. Therefore, I'm curious about what you observed. So when we do our conference reviews, if we do them, because we haven't done them each and every time over the years, I'll ask, what are your perspectives? What are your observations? What was your experience like? Do you have any questions about what went on? And also, do you have any ideas on how we can improve? That's a different framing than give me your feedback. Feedback, if it's not defined properly, comes from a knowing place, as opposed to an open-minded learning place. So how do you do this? Well, you actually do what I call OQIs, observations, questions, and ideas. And if you do that, you can actually see somebody for who they are. And one of the ways that I advocate you do this is through what I call the PAD framework. It's personal assessment and development framework. So as a father, as a career coach, going back to my college days, I've been very reflective and curious around what are the frameworks? How do you talk to somebody? Well, what are you passionate about? What are your strengths? Yeah, how do you actually frame this in a cohesive conversation so you can actually help somebody? So these 10 dimensions are something I came up with years ago, and it mirrors the talent assessment and development framework. They're the same thing. They're the exact same thing. But right now, how we develop ourselves is different than how organizations are looking at us, which is still different than the way job descriptions are done, the way people are assessed and developed, the way people are recruited, selected. But what it would be like if we got to a place where the way we described work through job descriptions, for example, is through the same lens by which we're assessing and developing internal candidates, which is still the same lens by which we're recruiting and assessing external candidates. Who here has a database where they write a job description like, oh, whoa, I wonder who has accomplished that. I wonder who's been in a role for that long, who has those types of relationships, who has those passions, who wants to make that type of money. Does anyone have that database? Why not? It's doable. It takes a concerted effort. And we don't have the governance structures and the mental models in place to make this happen. Now, the dimensions of the TAD framework and the PAD framework, skills and behaviors, contributions/accomplishments, you know, I'm sorry, I skipped experience. I'm going to go back because sometimes I go too fast. Experience. Now, all these are important. Education/knowledge, education, formal, knowledge, informal. Contribution/accomplishments. I can give a rat's tail what someone's responsible for. I want to know what they've actually done. I want to know what they've accomplished individually and contributed to as part of a team. Activities, the wise use of time, this notion of temporal intelligence. Are we aware of ourselves, how we're using our time, and is it aligned with achieving what we've been asked to do or what we want to do ourselves? Do we have the right relationships in place? What relationships do we need to nurture in order to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish? Now, this is highlighted through ONA and relationship analytics and so forth. Passions, purpose. There's a lot of research on passions and purpose right now. We had Aaron Hurst speak at the San Francisco event. He did a phenomenal job. He wrote The Purpose Economy, and it tagged right into this really nicely. Compensation, financial. What do I need to make as an individual to do this work, and what am I willing to pay as an organization? Similarly with benefits, wellness, not just about, you know, the healthcare benefits. It's about, hey, am I willing to work 60 hours a week given where I am in my life? Or am I have a young family, I'm only willing to work 30 hours a week and commute 10 minutes, you know, to work. So now we have a way by which we can craft jobs as well as ascertain what we want as individuals. You with me? Yeah? Okay. All right. I got 2 more concepts, and by the way, you'll have these slides, and I threw this in there just to break it all down. The one that I just skipped over. I'll let you look at that real quick, but you can see that. All right, so intentional language and models. So the analytics maturity progression, I do not like maturity models. That's the reason I'm putting emphasis on progression. And by the way, Jonathan Farrar, my partner in Insight 222, thinks similarly. We don't want to have this kind of grading on where we're at. That being said, if we're going to do this work well, we've got the data right? You know, we've done our homework, but this work is never done. We create context and meaning around that data. We now use the insight. So in other words, it informs strategy, let's say, on an ongoing recurring basis, whether it be every half year or every year. But really where we want to get is where we've operationalized the insight. It's not only done at the strategic levels, but it's done throughout the organization, through HR business partners and others. We've actually provided tools to enable that happen. And that's highlighted in this notion of people analytics 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, which I'll highlight in a second. I'm going to skip all of this stuff, but what I will say is there are workforce intelligence services, and I draw a distinction between workforce analytics and workforce planning. You call it people analytics and workforce planning. This takes historical data to predict the future. Now, most people analytics is done based on what's called the frequentist approach. Any statisticians in here or people with advanced degrees in research? Heather? Okay, a couple of you. Damn it. Usually I can get away saying anything I want, and Thomas would call me on it too. But anyway, the key question here is the past an accurate reflection of the future in your organization, in your life? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but we have to be conscious of it, right? If we're doing all this analytics that takes a bunch of data from the past and there's this underlying assumption that it's going to predict the future, oftentimes that's not correct, and we have to think about new methods and generate new data. When we do workforce planning, we can do different scenarios, but it takes data that's either really almost real time and we can forecast moving forward. Okay, and again, you'll have all these slides. So working together, we have a demand for talent, say out 24 months out. We have this gap. How are we going to shift that gap up and reduce the, say, recruiting needs of our organization? But we should be thinking about these in unison. In other words, workforce planning historically has lived in talent acquisition and recruiting organizations. And I don't believe that's where it should be living. It should be living in one place. And if I do that again, I'm going to kick myself. So here's People Analytics 3.0. If you haven't seen it, I wrote an article about it a couple years ago. But the essence is this, is that we've done research and analysis for eons. About 25, 30 years ago, and this is where Inform was an innovator, we aggregated data across the employee life cycle, visualized it, put it out through dashboards and reports so people could consume it. And now we're creating analytically based products. And it's not only benefiting executives, it's benefiting workers and team leads and so forth. Okay? So my final concept as I go is based on this. Here we have an employee life cycle, and we have a bunch of HR technologies within that life cycle. When I first started in this work, this is what we were looking at. But now we have this passive data that we can collect, or the data exhaust, as it's sometimes referred to, through email traffic, you know, what we're doing on collaboration tools like Slack and what have you. But we also have these external data sets that formerly were not in play when you go back 10, 15 plus years ago. So now we have all this people data. So what are we going to look at to answer the questions leaders want or need to know? Oftentimes, we're so focused on this data that we miss a lot of this data. And even I know, you're familiar with MZ and Talent Neuron and LinkedIn Talent Insights, Claro, Swoop. There's a variety of providers that can provide insight on your workers taking external data. Got it? Is anyone using external data now to answer questions within the organization? Not as much as I would have think, but that's a growing trend. So how do you frame this? So at Insight 222, of which I'm honored to be a partner, is we use what we call the 9 dimensions model of excellence in people analytics. And I won't go too deep into it right now, but you can take a survey, you can generate a report and have a customized workshop for your organization to ascertain where you are on these 9 dimensions: governance, methodology, stakeholder management, skills, technology, data, workforce experiences, business outcomes, and culture. And this is how we're now auditing where organizations not only are currently, but where they can go, so we can help develop roadmaps for them to get there. So if you're looking for a mental model to capture your efforts, please take a look. So this is the last thing. And how am I doing on time? I got 3 minutes, Adrian. I just eaten 5 minutes. The 4 C's of workforce planning: capability, capacity, cost, and construct. So capability, skills, capacity, we're all limited as human beings by what? Time. We have done a horrible job in our discipline looking at capacity. We just throw work on people and say, oh, they'll figure it out. Yeah, which is a strategy, but I believe we can do better, particularly given the data that's available. Cost and construct. Cost is self-explanatory. Cost is actually how the organization is designed, and this is where I'm going to land. Is that if we have, who's doing workforce planning here? A handful of you. And I believe when we talk about workforce planning, people analytics, I would love for us to be talking the same language. And we have a whole discussion that we can talk about. The beginning of wisdom is calling things by their right names. And yeah, I believe that it's best to be brought together in a, again, governance model where we're actually looking at what's happened in the past and how it's going to impact the future. And if we're doing that, by definition, we have a workforce plan. But here's the basics of how we're looking at it. Here's the current head count. We have attrition forecasted. Here's the talent demand because we're growing in that particular job family or segment. Here's the talent gap. So how are we going to fill that gap? Through an internal development strategy, we're going to learn people up. External recruitment strategy, we're going to hire people. We're going to redesign the organization, maybe shift the span of control or how people work together. Or we can get external help. And that can be everything from contractors, outsourced providers, machines, robotic automation, what have you. Got it? Does anyone have a similar framework for workforce planning? Similar. Okay.